Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Sorry for not uploading yesterday. I actually am in Lake Michigan now with some friends for about a week, and then I'm going to be heading over to North Carolina, so I'm in a bit of a tricky position where I'm just moving around a lot. I won't be actually home until June 7th, so that'll be a little bit tricky, but for right now, I think I'm going to be fine. I figured out a place to record, but yesterday was just so hectic I wasn't able to produce a video. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about the state of Colorado and why I have largely kept Colorado in practically the likely Democratic characterization, and on some few occasions as a safe state. If you take a look at the state of Colorado on my ratings, only one time had I actually deviated from the traditional likely or safe characterization, and the reason for that was because I think largely at this point it was right after Glenn Youngkin's victory, and I expected the race to narrow down tremendously across the United States, not only Colorado, but also New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and the reason being, I saw what happened with Glenn Youngkin, and I thought this would be the Republican Party's mimicking of what Youngkin did to win in 2022. What Youngkin had done was established that you can run as a Republican and also capture the Trump base while appeasing the moderate voters, meaning that he won over a significant portion of voters that very well backed Biden and Clinton in the past two presidential elections. What Youngkin did correctly was push away from Trump enough in a state where it was necessary, such as Colorado, such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, states that Donald Trump lost, and was able to still capture in that base very, very effectively, while making this a huge culture issue, which meant that there wasn't real focus on real substantial policies. This was about critical race theory. This was about education, things that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have clearly differing views on, but truly inconsequential, as critical race theory was never taught, is not taught in the state of Virginia. Things of that nature aren't typically taught in elementary schools, so that's something to take into account. And when you think about how that became a mainstream issue for the voters in Virginia, I thought that would be replicated on the national level. And since I have been let down by the Republican Party's inability to utilize a Youngkin level of strategy, the numbers have actually gotten a lot worse for the GOP, to a point where now in my most recent projection, I expect the Democratic Party to somehow retain control of the United States Senate. Now, it's not by a lot at all. In fact, it's just simply flipping Georgia and Pennsylvania to the opposing party sides, and we have three tilt races. But one race that really hasn't changed is Colorado. And even after that Youngkin victory, I still expected Colorado to go blue, despite having numerous other states in the likely, lean, safe Republican column. In fact, the only real race that wasn't safe D was the state of Colorado. So in addition to this, I've also been seeing some comments asking about, why exactly do I have Colorado in this position? Isn't it typically a swing state? And in the truest sense, yes, it typically is a swing state. If we go back to 2010, 2016, 2014, even, you will find that Colorado typically is within a few percentage points. For instance, in 2010, it was decided by less than 2. In 2014, it was decided by less than 3. In 2016, it was decided by less than 6. These are single-digit margins for the incumbents, non-incumbents, whatever it might be. And now we have the state of Colorado, which we can go ahead and pull up on the polling numbers here, where we have Michael Bennet in a pretty good position. Now, these are some old numbers. These are numbers from October. There's one number from April. Blueprint Polling, actually, I don't know if anyone has any type of insight into that polling firm, but I saw that they released numbers for Arizona. I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but I do want to ask if anyone knows anything about it, because it wasn't covered by Real Clear Politics or really any other major substantial media firms. It does show Mark Kelly with some pretty substantial victories. I'm considering covering it in another video, but I saw it a few days ago, and I was quite surprised to see that it hadn't been picked up, but it doesn't really have a rating or seemingly a knowing name to its polling firm, so that's something to take into consideration too. But they do release a number that shows Michael Bennet ahead by 6 points, but my likely margin that I've been keeping it in has been keeping it well within 5 to 15%. Now, looking back at the 2016 presidential election results, we know that Colorado, at least if you look back, Hillary Clinton won the state of Colorado. She won it by 4.9%. In almost every single Senate race from 2016, the Republican Party outperformed in these down ballot races. For instance, you look at Wisconsin, Russ Feingold lost the former senator there to Ron Johnson. This is actually a return bid for Russ Feingold. Ron Johnson won by, 3.4% across the state. That's pretty substantial when Donald Trump was winning by 0.7. Or in the state of Pennsylvania, another state Trump won by 0.7. Pat Toomey wins by 1.5. Trump wins Ohio by 8 points. Rob Portman wins by 20. Iowa goes to Trump by 9 points. Chuck Grassley wins by 25. You have Georgia, which goes to Trump by 5.1. Johnny Isakson wins by 13. North Carolina even goes to Trump by 3.7. Richard Burr wins by about 6. Florida goes to Trump by 1. Rubio wins by 7. Arizona 3.5. John McCain wins by, 12, 13. So you get the point. You get the point that on almost every other level, you typically saw the down ballot Democrat perform worse. I think there were very few states, at least that were competitive, that were in a position where Democrats did better on the down ballot race. They didn't do better in Illinois. They didn't do better in New Hampshire. They did a tie in Nevada. I think it was slightly worse. But the state of Colorado, surprisingly enough, did better. In fact, it was one of the very few swing states where we even saw an outperformance for Democrats, and even swing districts where the down ballot Democrats performed better. Looking at these numbers, Michael Bennet won with 50% of the vote against the Republican at 44.3. That is a margin there of about 5.7. Now, it's not super substantial. It's nothing to say that this race is solid, but it does say something about Bennett's ability to win. Now, Michael Bennet, you might recognize his name. He ran for president back in 2020. He also was a name that was just recognizable across the state of Colorado. We've definitely covered him, and he was a little bit of a person in contention back in 2016. In fact, if we go back and take a look at the historical election data, it is just quite interesting to see that Colorado outperformed for the Democratic Party. And we'll get into what the performance was for the Democratic Party in the 2020 election in just a moment. But what I want you to see is that Michael Bennet back in 2016 very much was in a competitive race. You take a look at the general election polling numbers, Bennet was about neck and neck by the end of it. Not necessarily neck and neck in the sense that it was anyone's race, but he definitely had a much larger lead earlier on out in the race. And by the time we actually got closer to the election, he was up by about maybe 5 to 6 points. Now, the pundits had said this was safety, likely D. I don't know where they got that characterization. I think Real Clear Politics was definitely a lot more practical in terms of their rating, which is also quite surprising because I think that to see this rated as safe Democrat, I mean, sure, it went to the Democratic Party at the end of the day, but a 5-point race is nothing to scoff at and say, this was not at all winnable for the GOP. But then again, there was a severe and significant overperformance for Donald Trump and Republicans across the nation in this election year that Democrats otherwise thought they were going to have locked down easily throughout this Senate and presidential race for obvious reason. So looking at the state of Colorado, the Democratic Party still outperformed. I mean, it's just quite significant. I will say that there were some states where the Democratic Party did much better than they did on the presidential level. For instance, in Missouri, where they did about 16 points better. You have Indiana, where they did about 10 points better. You have Kentucky, where they did about 15 points better. And these things happen because the Republicans are bad, and sometimes Democrats have a substantial, strong candidate. For instance, Gray in Kentucky, I believe that's Jim Gray, if I'm not misremembering. You have Evan Bayh, the former senator from the state of Indiana, who had a very interesting way of entering into this race. Actually wasn't the Democratic nominee, but it's a discussion for maybe in the future. You have Jason Kander, the former attorney general. I actually just listened to a podcast where they interviewed him. He's quite interesting. Very, very strong candidate, did very, very well. But, beyond that, when you're looking at the traditional swing states, especially one that are swing states now, because all of these likely red states have now turned into safe red states in this exact region, you have Colorado, which still circulates amongst, and I very well am confident the Democratic Party will win here. I've seen some people also bring up the Virginia governor's race because we saw it swing by about 13 points relative to the 2020 presidential election. Youngkin won by 12 points. Biden won the state by 10. And that's why I wanted to bring up the Virginia election results and the Colorado election results, because it is something to be said about even the largest swing wouldn't be enough to sway the state of Colorado. Like I said, Biden won by 10.1, even in, combining the down to the individual tenths places here, you have a Youngkin swing of about 12.1%. Well, Colorado went to Joe Biden by 13.5. Donald Trump couldn't even crack 42% of the vote in the state of Colorado. Joe Biden, on the other hand, was able to get 55%. Now, you might be saying, okay, maybe that makes sense because Biden won Colorado because for whatever reason, this was just a better year for the Democratic Party. They ended up winning. Obvious, right? Well, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won by 4.9, but you're saying, okay, this state probably wasn't as large because Hillary Clinton lost the election. And that's fair. It's a very valid point. But then you go to 2012. Okay, Obama's winning it by 5.4. That's weird, right? Because this is a state where, you're seeing Obama win larger on the national electoral vote. Why is Colorado 5.4? Go back to 2008. You're saying, okay, there is no way that Colorado is a closer margin than where it was for Biden. Well, it wasn't even double digits under, McCain, under Obama, 2008, when you had literally Indiana going blue. You had Michigan, which was a 17-point state, going to the Democratic Party. You had substantial victories, and there was nothing much that the GOP could do. But in Colorado, surprisingly enough, they ended up doing significantly better, I would say, at least in keeping everything into consideration, knowing that McCain lost the popular vote by 6 points, knowing that he lost the Electoral College with just 1/3 of the Electoral College votes, what we find in Colorado is that the Republican Party definitely put up a good fight. And I would say more money went into the race in 2020, and yet a significantly worse result came out of it. And, Joe Biden's 14-point victory is absolutely enough for me to say, stepping back and looking at it from an analytical point of view, as much as the Republican Party would like to be competitive in Colorado, it simply isn't happening. And I think that this is a state where if the GOP is to invest a lot of resources in, it wouldn't make sense. I am never one to say that a party should give up a race, and I don't think that they should, quote unquote, give up a race. What I do think should happen at this point is that the Republican Party should recognize, hey, this isn't going to be our prime target. The governor's race also doesn't help. What do I mean by that? Well, in 2018, Jared Polis was elected in the state of Colorado, won by 11 points. And you're saying, okay, 2018 midterm year, that's fine, right? So you fast forward to 2022, what's happening? Well, you find a significant lead for Jared Polis, and not for bad reason. Jared Polis is a good governor within the state of Colorado. That's not my personal opinion. That's the opinion of the 55-60% of voters that approve of him. I'm looking at the numbers and saying, these people think he's good, so I'm going to refer to him, at least in some capacity, as a very liked and very well-respected governor across the state of Colorado. In fact, when you take a look at polling numbers, he's one of the best performing Democratic governors out of the 23, I think, across the United States, ranking within the top, I think, 3 to 5, doing well across the state of Colorado. So when you see his approval rating, when you see that people are happy with his current leadership, people are likely to reelect him. And since he's a Democrat, that doesn't help the Republican Party in this down ballot race where they have the Democrats being where the Democratic Party has a strong candidate as well. You have a popular candidate as well. This is where it gets tricky. This is where it gets difficult for the GOP, which means their future target probably should be 2026 when this is an open race. Their future target probably should be another election year where they could actually win in the state of Colorado. What I am not seeing right now is how the Republican Party possibly comes away with a victory in either the gubernatorial race or the Senate race. And that's just simply where I stand on the issue. Now, I wanted to wait until more data had come out. I think that the state of Colorado is definitely an underpolled state, though, for a reason. There's a reason why no one wants to waste money by going into the race to poll a race that we know is going to be solid. I actually am I'm surprised to see that we don't have more data, simply because, even my home state of Maryland gets polled sometimes for Senate races. You have random states that shouldn't be being polled, but are being polled. And I don't say that because I want pollsters to at all neglect any state, but more so that I think that those resources and that time spent on a poll probably would be better spent and more efficient in other states that already have the ground game and the structure to do these polls, not ground game, but just the overall structure. But again, that's just my opinion on the matter. What state were we looking at? Colorado. 1 second. I don't know how I completely forgot that. Going down to the ratings. Let's see if they have any predictions. I guess that's what they rate it now. So it's a little bit worse for the Democratic Party than where it was back in 2016, probably because they realized, hey, it can get close, especially if the Republican Party does significantly well on the top level. But keep in mind, Michael Bennett is more popular now than he was then. Jared Polis is going to be on this ballot, and Colorado also is nearly 10 points more Democratic between the 2016 presidential that this coincided with and the 2020 presidential. This is going to take place after. It's much harder to fall from a 13.5% margin than it is from a 4.9% margin. When Clinton won the state by 5 and Biden won the state by 14, there clearly is more Democratic voters. There is more wiggle room for Democrats to win, meaning the Republican Party has that much more. What is that? 9 points more to make up from the last election, whereas otherwise, a 5-point race meant that it could have been possible. Had this been, let's say, 2018, Hillary Clinton won the presidency, Republicans were doing very well across the nation, poised to pick up West Virginia, Montana, Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota, Florida, all of these states, right? The Democratic Party probably would be in a position where now Colorado is ground zero for competitiveness. Let's say Hillary Clinton wins another term. Now 2022 becomes a state where at least the Republican Party could potentially win in the state of Colorado. So it definitely is national circumstances, but I don't think Biden is unpopular enough in Colorado that the state becomes competitive, nor do I think the national numbers swinging as much as they did even in Virginia, where you saw an overwhelming swing, that Colorado is going to be a state that ends up competitive enough that the Republican Party is within striking distance of victory. I don't think it'll be a 15-point plus margin. That's why it's not safe. But I do think that the Democratic Party has been locked down in the seat. We know they're going to win. It's just a matter of margin at this point in time. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.